great to be here. What I'm going to talk to you about today is professional data presentation with just one trick. Now, I don't have any Jedi jokes up my sleeve, so what I'm going to show you instead are 3 methods together with one simple but overlooked trick that's going to help you make more professional reports. And by more professional reports, I mean reports that are going to set you apart from the rest. I'm going to show you an example in a second. Presenting data in tables is an important part of every business interaction. Like, think about the reports you have in your company. You have a lot of these monthly reports, annual reports. You have tables in there that you're showing the data. Data visualization in terms of charts and graphs, they're good for comparisons, they're good for showing trends, but sometimes you just want to show different things in one place. So tables are great for showing different units of measure in one place. Right? And management likes those type of reports. Management likes tables because they like to read the data. Now, we spend a lot of time gathering the data. Like you saw examples, we use offset, we use index match, pivot tables, maybe Power Query. There's a lot of time spent digging into the data, getting what we need out of it, but we don't think, generally we don't think enough about how we're going to present that data. Now, presenting the data becomes really important because I thought at the time, but what am I going to do with it? I can't dress it up. It's just the data, right? I'm just going to show that. I realized later I was actually wrong. So my background is in economics. I studied economics. I worked as an economist. And then I switched to consulting and then finance, controlling, and IT for over 10 years. And I had my share of preparing these reports, like monthly reports or presenting data in meetings. And I would be perfectly fine to present something like this. Okay, so let's say in the company we had these 3 different products and we wanted to show sales volume, revenue, and margin. I'll be fine with presenting this. My colleagues who'd be in the presentation, they'll be fine with this. My boss would be fine with this. I might go a step further. I might add totals to this, right, to make the analysis easier. And I might add the change to previous year. I might show the deviations for budget and previous year. Right? And I would think, yeah, this is fine. Everyone was fine. This is great. But what I realized happened when I would pull this up is that I lose the attention of half of the room. Right? They stop paying attention. There's nothing interesting here. The ones who were interested, so my boss would look, I would have their attention, but the rest of the people, I just lost them. And I felt that all the work that I put in, so I put in 5 hours to make this, to grab, to consolidate, make the adjustments, to come to this stage, I felt like it didn't have the impact that I wanted it to have. Imagine this. Imagine your good friends are coming over for dinner. You haven't seen them for a long time, and you want to make a really good dinner. You want to make an impression. So you wake up early, you research recipes, you wake up, you go to the food market, you buy the best ingredients, you prepare, you spend a lot of time making an exotic dish, side dish, everything. They come over. You want to serve them. So you pour the food, all the nice stuff that you created, you just dump it on a plate, you mix it up, smash it with a fork, and you put it in front of them. What are they going to do? They're not going to want to eat it, right? It doesn't look tasteful. And if they don't eat it, what's going to happen? All your hard work was just wasted, right? You didn't make the impression that you wanted to make. And all the time you spent wasn't appreciated. Now, had you done this differently, had you just spent 5 minutes just 5 minutes, presenting the food nicer on the plate, they'd eat it, they'd love it, and they're going to appreciate all the work that you put in it. Right? So it comes down to just those 5 minutes. That was the most important part of the entire process. Because people don't see the effort. People see the end result. So had I done this differently, had I instead pulled out a report that looked like this, it's the same stuff, same thing, just looks different. That took me 5 minutes extra to do to get here. This would have a different impact, right? Because those people who lost attention, at least some of them, are going to be interested, like, who's that green one? Why is there a green box there? Oh, that's product A, that's the margin. Why do those have red? At least it's going to spark their interest to look deeper. And my boss is going to be like, oh, that's a nice report, well done. He's going to perceive everything differently. He's going to think I put so much effort to get here, but I didn't. I just spent 5 extra minutes to get here. And the thing is that I'm not saying that if you don't do this, if you don't spend the 5 minutes, no one is going to consume the data, right? Because hungry people eat no matter how the food looks. Management will go through that data no matter how it looks. They need the data. They don't care. But 2 things are going to happen when you do this. One is that people start to pay attention. They want to dig deeper. So your effort actually has an impact. And 2 is that your efforts are actually going to be appreciated. All the hours that you put in are going to be appreciated. So what I'm going to share with you are 3 methods and 1 trick how you can spend that 5 minutes. And it comes down to emphasis, optimizing the layout, and automating it. I think you're going to find the 3rd one interesting as well. So before we get to the trick is around the emphasis. All I did in my 2nd report was to add emphasis. And how do you do that? How do you add emphasis? You just have to add contrast. You just have to bring in something that looks different to the rest. So in my original report, you see the only contrast I had was my header, and I had some bold in there. In the report that I redid, I added a light gray band to the totals. I just used white as my contrast. You don't have to add borders. They're distracting. You don't always need that. And it's a smaller data set, so it's easier to read. And because in this presentation that I made, it was very important, the comparisons, the deviations. Are we doing better than budget? Are we doing better than previous year? I can bring in emphasis using icons and color, right? You just have to use them smartly, but they direct the attention to what I want people to notice. And the thing is that our brain can look at color, can count color, and can count shapes much faster than it can count numbers. Right? So you make it easy for them to read the data. And this takes us to the trick here. And the trick is around these little boxes. So let's take a look at how we can set that up. So I have one version that shows it everywhere. Let me just make this bigger. That shows these deviations, that shows the red and green for every single line. And you can do that if you don't have a big table, but what I prefer is to add in thresholds. So down here, I have a threshold. It's a fixed one of 5%. In this table. And on the bottom one here, I have a dynamic threshold. So Let's say sometimes I want the threshold to be 5%, but sometimes I want it to be 2%, sometimes 0, sometimes 10%. Okay, I want to make it easier for me to adjust the threshold. So now my question is, what do you think, what type of feature or trick do you think I'm using here? Any? Just shout it out. Conditional? Not conditional formatting. Custom formatting. Well done. Do you watch my videos? Ah, good job. So that's the main overlooked trick, because most people would probably solve this with conditional formatting. And that's also fine, but let's just talk about why. Why custom formatting? So first, let's take a look at the advantages. One is that I did a test on 40,000 lines of data, and I used the great macro from Charles Williams that, thank you, you make it available on the website. And I tested the custom formatting approach and the conditional formatting approach. Custom formatting was 3 times faster than conditional formatting. The other advantage is it's super easy to use. It's much easier than conditional formatting. And you're going to see why in a second. And the last thing is that you don't have these duplications. You know, have you ever had the thing if you use conditional formatting and then you copy it and all of a sudden you see in the rules, it's like repeated, and you're like, what the hell happened? Yeah? With custom formatting, you don't have that problem. They're not duplicated. It's really simple. Now, when I talk about custom formatting, just so we're all on the same page here, what I mean with it is when you right mouse click and you go to Format Cells, or if you do Control-1, shortcut for custom formatting, is this. That's custom formatting. And with that, you can get the boxes. And the part that we're going to use is this one. But when I first saw custom formatting, I remember I wanted to hide zeros in my report. And then I came here and I got scared with all these weird things up here with these brackets and hashtags. And then I just Googled it to solve it. But I realized later that it's actually very simple once you know the rule behind this. So what's the rule behind this? Who knows the rule behind, or the main rule behind custom formatting? Yeah. Yeah? Did you all hear that? Positive, negative, 0, text. Okay? You just have to memorize this. Positive, negative, 0, text. Because you can influence with this how you want your number to look. If it's positive, how do you want it to look? If it's negative, how do you want it to look? If it's a 0, how you want it to look? You might want to hide it. And if it's a text, how you want it to look. Okay, so now let's just see how we can use this trick to get the job done with our symbols. Okay, so we're going to do it here. Now, I have my changes already calculated. Before I start to use custom formatting, so I want to add it in column G. Right? Before I start to use it, what is the first thing I need to do? Can I just go in now and format this cell? Or do I need something before? Data, I need numbers in there, right? So I need some numbers to say how do I want to show positive, negative, 0, and text. So I'm just going to do equals this. And I'm going to just copy the formula down without copying the formatting. Do you know how that's done? F2? Yeah, I mean, you can pull it down and then switch it, or you can press F2, Control Enter. Okay, so F2, you go in edit mode of the cell, and then you press Control Enter, you copy everything without copying the formatting, because if I drag this down, I'm going to drag that gray border also down, and I don't want that border to come. Now, the second thing is I'm planning to use symbols. You see all those little boxes, they're actually symbols. And to get symbols, I can go to Insert, and here you can see all the symbols. The symbols I personally use often are under Arial, under, I think the subgroup is Geometric Shapes. Okay, so you'll find these arrows, and I find them actually much nicer than the conditional formatting icons, because those are so bulky. They're too big. They're not elegant enough. And here is the square that I was using, but actually in this case, let's just use the up and down arrows first. So all you have to do is just bring it into your file. So you click on it, and you press Insert. It inserted it here. I also want this one, so I'm just going to press Insert. Okay, so I just have them in my file so I can copy and paste them. Now I'm going to copy this, just so I have them on clipboard. And these are the ones that I want to format, so highlight. And the shortcut key, Control-1, custom format. And now, here's the thing. Let me make this bigger for you so you can see. Is that better? Okay, so here for type, this is where our rule comes into play. Plus, minus, 0 text. So if it's a plus, I'm just going to paste what I copied. Let's say if it's a positive number, I want to show it as this one. So let me cut this one out. I want to show it as this arrow. So I'm just going to make camouflage the number to look like this arrow. If it's a negative number, I'm going to show it as the down arrow. And the separator is the semicolon. And I think that's identical in all languages, because in German, it's the same separator in here. So then I'm going to add another separator after the bottom one, because let's say I want to hide zeros. And if I don't put anything in the third argument, it means I'm hiding zeros. Okay, so let's just go with that. And we have our up and down arrows. Right? It was really simple. All we did, go to custom formatting and put in our arrows, separate them with a semicolon. But now, it would also be nice to bring in some color to this, right? Let's make the up arrows green, or any color that we want. So to do that, there are special codes that you can use. And there are standard ones from Excel. So do you know, the codes actually, these ones are language dependent. So I would type in green, because I have the English version. You type in the Bulgarian version of green for the standard colors. But if you send it to someone else, so if you do it in Bulgarian and you send it to me, I open it here, it's going to work fine, because just like formulas, Excel is going to translate these as well. Okay, so the color comes in square brackets. Okay, so that's the part you need to remember, and it's always discovering your square brackets on the keyboard can be a challenge. Okay, so you put it in square brackets, green, let's say, and I'm just going to go with the standard red for these ones. Okay, that's it. You see, I told you it's a challenge, didn't I? So wait. This magnifier, let me get rid of the magnifier. This one. Yeah. Okay, so these are the standard green and the standard red. And personally, I don't like that green. You need like your sunglasses to make it look good. So what I use is special color codes for these. And I've added a link. I think it's down here. I've added a link to the color codes from Microsoft in these workbooks. And I think you're going to have the workbooks available, right? Later for download. So you're going to see them. Let me see where I put it. Because I tried to Google it, but for some reason, I mean, Google is always great to find stuff on Microsoft. It's better than searching in Microsoft directly. But for some reason, this one is difficult to find. So I added the link here. Let's see. And I have a blog post on this as well, so you can see it there as well. But these are the colors that you can use. And this is the codes that you need. So a nicer green that I sometimes use is color 10 or color 43. And for red, if you want a darker red, I think it's 53 is nicer. But you can use gray or any other color that you want from here. So let's go back. And let's add these color codes to this. So to go back, just highlight Control 1. Let me bring this up. So for green, you put in color, and here you have to put the Bulgarian version of what color is, and then the color code. So let's say I do 43, and for red, you can use 53. So you just still keep it in the square brackets. You put the word color, and then you put the code in it. Okay. And then you get them in this nicer colors. Okay, so that's one thing. Now, how do you do this with thresholds? Does anyone know how to do thresholds? So if I want to add, I don't want to bring attention to every single deviation, but I want to bring attention to differences that are above plus 5%, less than minus 5%, just to direct the attention to the parts that need attention most. Does anyone know how to add thresholds? You know. Ah, yes. So that's one way. We're going to come to it in a second. But another way of adding thresholds is to use another rule for this custom formatting. So this one is really not used that often. I've personally never seen live anyone using this in their reports at companies, but there's this rule as well. And it can come in handy for adding fixed thresholds. So instead of doing plus minus 0 text, you do upper, lower, other. Upper, lower, other. And you define these thresholds in these square brackets. Did anyone know of this? Okay, so it can come in handy for these type of fixed thresholds. So let's go and do that. This time, I want to use a square instead of up and down arrows. So I'm just going to go and insert it in a cell so I can copy and paste it. Okay, so first thing we need, what was the first thing we need before we go to custom formatting? Data, right? We need to bring our data in. So we highlight equals, Control Enter. We get our data in. So now let's go and apply this rule. So I'm going to copy my symbol. I'm going to highlight this. Control 1, custom. So let's bring up the magnifier. Okay, so what was the first one? The first threshold? Yeah? Positive. So positive becomes upper, whatever you want the upper to be. And then the negative becomes whatever you want the lower to be. And you define it in square brackets. So let's say we want it to be greater than 5%. We want to bring attention to anything greater than 5%. So 0.05. I'm going to paste in my symbol, and actually I'm going to put it in green as well, or let's do color 43. Okay, so that's our upper. Lower, I want it to be less than minus 5%. So less than minus 0.05, and let's do color 53, that was the other red, and let's paste this. Okay, and the other, so the rest that are in between that I don't want to bring attention to, I'm going to put them in white. And I'm going to put nothing for them. Okay, so just quotation, quotation. So let's see if I entered everything properly. And I get my 5% threshold. Right, so now I'm only bringing attention to the outliers. And the best thing is, this part is really easy to copy and paste. I can apply it to budget. All I have to do is copy this and paste this here, because the formulas are dynamic, right? They're referencing the next cell. The custom formatting is copied as well, and that's that. Okay, so all with me here? Great. So now comes the other one. Based on what we saw now, how do we create a report that has a dependent threshold that you can define? Because there's no way that you can do formula references in the custom formatting box. You can't do that. And you already said the answer, which was if. You can use an if function, because remember, the first version that we saw allows us to control 4 different scenarios: positive, negative, 0 text. So all we have to do is to translate our different scenarios that we want to show a positive number if the difference is greater than this cell. Show a negative number if it's less than minus 5%, or whatever this cell is. But with the if formula, we can make it dynamic. Right? And you can even have 4 conditions. You're not restricted to upper, lower, and other. You can put in 4 conditions and show 4 different types of symbols if you want, or 4 different types of colors. So let's do the if one. So first thing, we're just going to say that if this value here is greater than this value, okay, so I'm going to fix that one, right? Because I'm planning to pull the formula down. I don't want my threshold to come down. If it's this, then it should show me, I can say show me the number, or I can just put a placeholder. I can say show me a 1. A 1 is a placeholder for any positive number. So I say show me a 1, and if this number is less than minus 5%, press F4 to fix it, then show me minus 1. So it's just a placeholder for any negative number. You can put anything you want as long as it's negative. Otherwise, show me a 0. That's my third condition. Okay, so let's close this. So in this case, it's correct, right? It's 0. So let's just copy this down. Okay, so I have here a minus 1, which is good. And here's a minus 1, here's a 1 because it's above 5%. And if I change this now to 1, you see these change. So now all we have to do is to use our formatting that we had for positive, negative, and text. So let's just, actually I think I already have it in there. So once you do the formatting once, It's inside your custom formatting. So you can reuse it in that workbook. So here, for example, I have, if it's positive, right? If it's positive, show it as green. If it's negative, show it as that. If it's 0, don't show it. So we just have to take that one. And we have a dynamic threshold. So to apply it to the next one, I just copy this and paste this. And depending on the data set that I have, depending on the type of presentation I make, I can change this threshold really easily. Right? So it's a really simple trick that makes a big impact when you're presenting data. Okay, so that takes us to helping you with the emphasis part. And you don't always have to do this, right? Not all reports need this. It's just the reports that you think, yeah, I want to make people pay attention. I want them to have their interest, to look deeper in the data, and I want to bring attention to those. Okay, so only for those type of reports, you can do that. But the next things that come into play is optimizing the layout and the color that you use in the reports. And here's the thing, sometimes I see people use too much color in their reports, especially in the headings. It's too distracting. So for color, just like any other areas of design, less is more. Okay, so just bring attention to what you want to bring attention. And I have no feeling for design myself, but people think I have feeling for design because I use the Adobe color wheel. That's my secret. Does anyone use the Adobe color wheel? It's perfect to match colors. So let's say you have a logo, right, in your company, and you want to create a report that harmonizes, any colors you use harmonize with that logo color. I use the Adobe color wheel. I just get the color code of the logo. Let me show you how it looks. You put it in the Adobe color wheel. You just have to put it down here, either the RGB code or the hex code. And it gives you suggestions of all colors that harmonize with it, and in different ways. So you can choose like complementary, these different types of color combinations, and whatever you pick from here, you can be sure it works. The only difference is like colors change the mood of the report, so just use them. Don't use them too much. Just think, okay, yeah, this blue fits with that logo. I'm going to use that. And whatever you use, you can be sure that it's going to look good on your report. I guess that's the secret to good color choice in reports. Now, the other thing is, what I also tend to do is, or what I tried my last organization to do, is to use a standard color logic throughout the report. Like you saw here, what I did is to use this dark for the actual, another color for previous year and budget. And if you're showing different scenarios, it really makes sense to keep that color throughout your entire report. So all your management reports, make sure you use these, right? If you use charts, use this for actual. Use that for previous year and budget. Because it helps the people read the data so much faster. They see the color, they know, okay, that's budget. Okay, so try to use standard colors in that. And it doesn't just have to be for scenarios. It can be for products as well. You have different products, assign a color to them. People see that color, they know what you're talking about. It's easier for them to read. Okay, so here's an example of BMW, because I did a 3-video series on BMW's 2015 annual report, where I just took some of their graphs and tables, and I just showed alternate ways of presenting them. But what I noticed that BMW did is that this is how their table used to look in 2015, and in 2017, it looks a bit different. It looks like this. Right? So they used emphasis to bring more attention to the actuals. Okay, all they did is color it, but now we just pay attention to the actuals. It's easy to know where they are. And notice they didn't bring attention to the change. Probably they didn't want to maybe bring attention to the change. It's the annual report. They want people to concentrate on what they actually made. And here's another example of a corporation with their KPIs like this. So they bring a lot of attention to the headers. It's just a lot of noise on the header. An alternate way of doing this is this. Just use the color for the header. People know what this report is about. And then you have the standard colors for actual budget previous year. It's much neater. It's easier for everyone to digest this information. Okay, and I have added some examples as well. So these examples, you can get them all here. So this is the BMW report. This is one other example. And here, I just redesigned the table to make it easier to read and adding some deviations, just the same concept that we saw before. Or when I use conditional formatting, I tend to use it for data bars, what Tony showed before. Those are good for also bringing attention to differences, because then you see, you can compare the size of the difference. Because it really depends on what you want to do. Now, the last thing that I want to leave you with is the third tip. And that's when it comes to automating tables, like we're used to using formulas, right? If you're presenting for management, you're actually going to use like some formulas to get the data out of wherever you had in that table, right? But what we don't tend to use are pivot tables. We don't use that for the end result because they don't look nice, right? We use it for analysis, but not for the end result. And now here's the thing. You can make it look just as great as our other table with just a few tricks, just some design changes. So this is a standard pivot table, right? If we present this, we're going to be a bit embarrassed, right, to put this up. So an alternate way of doing this is this, and that's a pivot table, right? The moment our data updates, if you use tables, the official Excel tables, this pivot table is going to update. It's a pivot table. Now, how do you do this? Well, I've also included this in the file. So let me show you. So here's the data set for that pivot table. Now, the best way to do this is to format it as a table. And you saw that before, right? Because the advantage is new data come in, everything is updated. Now, this was our before, and this is the after. And all I did was, well, to make some design changes here, I added my own custom design to this. And you can do that by just taking a simpler version, right-mouse clicking it, and duplicating one, and then changing it the way you want. Okay, just changing the design. And basically, I normally start with the simplest design, because Excel, they like colors. They sometimes use too much. So I just change it to the simplest design. I duplicate it, and then I use my own version. And here I put out the steps on what I did. So if you ever want to follow along and make it your own, you know what I changed here. Because there are a lot of factors in that design, and it can be really confusing, like what is that table, that part. This is going to help you. It walks you through that. And what I also did before is these ones. So there's some changes to the pivot, like removing buttons and headers, switching to tabular format. That's something that Tony showed you too. So from here, let's say the standard one, I would just here go to, let's say, to design. And under the layout, I would show it in tabular format. That gives me the totals. And then I can apply my custom one that I already made, that I showed you. You'll see how to make it with that, with those steps. You apply it. It already looks much better. And then you can take the buttons away, so these buttons and these field headers, and then change the titles, because no one wants to see sum of quantity as a header, right? So if I change it to just quantity, Excel doesn't like it. Gives me an error, right? Because it just says it can't be identical to that. So what trick do you normally use? Space. Exactly. You just add a space either before or after, just to change it to the word that you want. Okay, the other thing that actually I did here was to do our symbol thing, right? To do this in the pivot table. How did I do that? Custom formatting, right? And before doing that, remember we said we need data, right? We need to add in data to be able to custom format it. So let's say I want the revenue change between 2018 and 17. Let's just remove these total quality from here. And to move things around in the pivot is really simple. You just have to actually just drag it on the side that you want, because we want to show the actual year first, previous year after. So just remember, just drag it and pull it to the side. And now let's just say I want to show the difference in revenue to previous year with these symbols. What's the first thing I have to do? Add something. I have to bring in a field, right? I have to bring in. So I'm going to bring in revenue again, right? I'm going to have it 2 times. Okay, so I'm going to bring it again. And actually, let's use this version. Now, if you don't want anything in the header, because I want to have my symbols here, if you leave it as empty, Excel again doesn't like it, so just put an empty space if you don't want the header in there. And now I brought in revenue 2 times, but I want to show the difference in revenue to previous year. And the great thing with pivot tables is when you right mouse click there, you have so many great options. So does anyone know how to do that? Yeah? Show values as? Show values as? And which one should I go with? Difference from? Yeah, I can do the percentage if I want, but let's say if I just want symbols, it doesn't really matter if they're in percentage or actual numbers. So my base field, though, is instead of product, I'm going to select year, right? Because in this pivot table, I have year in a column. I'm going to select year. And this part can be a bit confusing where you want to base it from. Previous means the previous column. It doesn't mean the previous year. Okay, so always remember that previous is the previous column, and next is the next column, not the next year. It's the next column that comes after this. So in this case, I do want to take next, and now I have the difference between this year's revenue and last year's revenue. Right? Let's just make this a bit bigger. Now, I just have to disguise these, right? With my boxes or arrows or whatever I want. And this is the most important part that Tony also covered, is that when you format this, just don't forget not to do format cells. Don't do format cells. Do number format, right? Because the advantage is if your pivot expands, that format comes with it. Format cells only formats the cells below in that pivot. Okay, but you want it to expand. And then we go to custom, and I already have my one there, so I'm going to use this and say OK, and I have my symbols. Right? And that's it. So now the one annoying thing that I don't know why it's not a default is if you refresh stuff, your columns expand, right? So it kind of messes up your formatting. Very annoying. The way you can stop that is to change it in the pivot table options. So under Analyze, under Pivot Table, Options, there is this thing that's always checked by default, and it's called Autofit. You don't want it to autofit, right? You probably want it to fit it the way that you want. So you take away the tick mark there. And this way, if you refresh it, it's not going to switch your columns. Okay? It's all in the same format that you had it before. So let's just demonstrate quickly as my last thing is if I add more data to my table, how is this going to update? So I have some sample data here on the bottom. Let me just copy and paste this. So there's a new division called Health that we're adding. Notice that my table expanded. That little blue icon comes down. Now I'm going to go to my after here, and let's just make sure I'm in the correct year here. This is December. I think I have my data in December. So when we refresh, everything is there. Health department is there. Our deviations are there, right? And this looks great in a report. So if you just go to Print Preview, let's zoom in. You see, it looks nice in a report. They don't see those icons, the drop-downs. Nothing is visible. And you've saved a lot of time by having a table in the background and having a pivot table as the end result. Okay, so what I want to leave you with today, the key takeaways from today's session, is that whenever you come to finally presenting that data, after you put in all the effort to get the data to where you want it presented, just spend 5 minutes and think about what you want to emphasize in that report. Use custom formatting if you want. Use simple table design and use a pivot table if it makes sense, right? Because just remember that people are not going to see the effort that you put in. They're only going to see the end result. Thank you.
Thanks, Leila. Before our last speaker, we are a little bit not in time, but if there is one question to Leila, okay, just one, and we continue it.
Hi, thank you very much. Big fan of your channel. So you often talk about shortcuts and how to do things faster. And I wonder because recently I come across many times on this thing in Google called QTools. So I wanted to ask you if you've used it. It's an Excel add-in, and what do you think about it? And should people use it to shorten their times?
What is it called?
QTools. It's an Excel add-in.
Do you guys know it?
Yeah.
I haven't used it personally.
Okay.
So you'll have to show it to me, and then I'll tell you my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe we can catch up in the break.
Okay, please welcome again. Applause for Leila.
Thank you.
Thank you.